And we're on. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Sphera live event. Today, I'm here with Andrea Fioravanti of Linkiesta, which is one of our national media partners that we have here in our Sphera project. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about climate and especially the Fridays for Future movement, which Andrea made a great video for Sphera this week about that. So a little bit about Linkiesta. Linkiesta is a media based in Italy, and they primarily focus on investigative journalism, which I love. And they like to go deeper into the stories and find the in-depth narratives that exist there, and also fight a little bit of the counter-current media battles that are consistently happening, especially in online media. So first of all, Andrea, we're going to watch the video that you made for us, which tackles the youth climate movement Fridays for Future and how their communication has been impacted by the pandemic. But to begin, I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about why you chose this topic and what motivated you to dive into the movement of Fridays for Future.
First of all, let me thank you for inviting me. And I want to say that I'm thrilled to be here talking about climate change, and I'm happy to do it within the Sphera project. I think it's one of the bravest projects I've ever made, and I'm proud that Linkiesta is inside on this idea of future and communication to that generation. Basically, I think climate change is the battle of the century. That's why my newspaper created the Linkiesta, which is a vertical newspaper inside our newspaper that talks every day about climate issues. So I was wondering what Fridays for Future movement has been doing during the pandemic, and then I tried to explain that on the video. But what was I curious about is how we'll behave in the future. How can convince the public that maybe are listening to us right now, what is going to be the future of Fridays for Future movement?
The future of Fridays for Future. I love it.
Many F's.
So, let's watch the video that you made for us, and we'll be right back with some more questions and discussion.
My name is Greta Thunberg. I'm 60 years old and I want you to panic.
A 15 anni ha smesso di andare a scuola il venerdì per sensibilizzare tutto il mondo sui rischi del cambiamento climatico. A 16 anni ha guidato un movimento di oltre 7 milioni di ragazzi e ragazze in tutto il mondo chiamato Fridays for Future.
Ciao Roma!
È stata il più giovane personaggio mai apparso sulla copertina di Time. Ha parlato a tu per tu con tutti i potenti della Terra, dall'Assemblea delle Nazioni Unite al Parlamento Europeo. Ma poi è arrivata la pandemia e Greta Thunberg è passata in secondo piano. Torneremo davvero a parlare di clima come facevamo un anno e mezzo fa? E soprattutto, che fine ha fatto il movimento Fridays for Future? In questi mesi di lockdown il mondo ha continuato a soffrire per le conseguenze del cambiamento climatico e i ragazzi di Fridays for Future hanno continuato a protestare online. Ma non è la stessa cosa. Per questo a marzo si sono riuniti fisicamente in 700 città di tutto il mondo per lanciare un messaggio chiaro. Il Covid-19 è il sintomo, il clima è la malattia. Chiedono un consiglio climatico indipendente che elabori una legge sul clima operativa fin da subito in tutta Europa. Per mettere pressione sui politici europei hanno piazzato un climate clock sulla facciata della Commissione europea a Bruxelles. Quell'orologio segna 7 anni, il tempo che secondo Fridays for Future ci rimarrà prima che i danni dell'uomo sulla Terra siano irreversibili. E Greta che fine ha fatto? La ormai 18enne attivista svedese ha inglobato la pandemia all'interno della sua comunicazione ambientalista. L'ultimo esempio è il video pubblicato su Instagram a fine maggio, in cui chiede di passare a una dieta a base vegetale per prevenire ulteriori crisi ecologiche e sanitarie. Secondo Thunberg, 3 nuove malattie su 4 si propagano dagli animali, costretti a stare a stretto contatto con l'uomo attraverso l'allevamento intensivo e la distruzione degli habitat. Per continuare a mantenere alta l'attenzione dei cittadini di tutto il mondo sui rischi del cambiamento climatico, Greta Thunberg spiega nel video che la crisi climatica è interconnessa a quella ecologica e sanitaria. Ma per farlo non usa giri di parole e va dritta al punto.
If we don't change, we are f***ed.
Let me just begin by saying that I really love the ending of that video. It's very, very impactful and kind of brings Greta back at the forefront, as it were, which I really like.
Me too, and I like it. I liked very much the part when she says "Ciao Roma." I think I made a very good thing with the making, but let's not praise ourselves.
It was excellent. So speaking a little bit more generally, and also from my personal experience during the pandemic, is that we've heard a lot of discussion about climate change during this pandemic. And so in the first place, what I was seeing more of as I was sitting in my room wondering what the world was going to be and doom scrolling a little bit, was I saw a lot of things, first of all, focusing on flights decreasing, and then everyone getting really excited that the pollution of that mode of transport was going down. And we also heard this week in an excellent video from my friends at El Salto, the Spanish partner in Sphera, that air pollution decreased in a lot of European cities over the pandemic, which prevented quite a few pollution-related deaths. So this seems like a relatively positive thing, but now we're also hearing more and more in the news, for example, about different aspects of climate change, such as a lot of masks being in the ocean and that creating a lot of waste, these kind of single-use masks that people are changing out because you're meant to change them out, in a matter of hours. And also just the fact that, according to a recent report, 2020 was one of the hottest years on record alongside 2016. So we have a very kind of multifaceted understanding of climate change based on what we read in the media, and I myself am no expert. So let's dive into a few questions relative to your video. First of all, how do you see the change in Greta's communication tactics over the course of the pandemic?
Of course, I see an evolution of Greta Thunberg's communication because, as I said in the video, she tried to say there's not just the climate change, but there's also the problem of how we raise animals in order to eat them, the way we produce disease, even if we don't want to, because in the video I say that Greta says, sorry for the play of words, that 3 to 4 out of 4 diseases are from how we destroy natural habitats. And the animals that live there, they make contact with the human, not in a pleasant way. So that's how we don't know for sure 100%, but that's how the coronavirus started. So there are a lot of hypotheses, but that's about Greta's communication. I think she is in the third phase of communication, because in the first time she was the perfect icon of pop. But she was a little girl, 15 years old, in Sweden, going and every Friday doing a climate strike. As a journalist, this is the perfect story for me because it touches so many stereotypes and so many public image. I don't want to diminish the great job that did Greta Thunberg. I'm just saying that was the perfect person for the perfect time. German used to say a word like Zeitgeist, like the person who catches the spirit of the time. And she has done it. But in the first time media, and in Italy, this was really huge. We treated, I'm speaking like we country or we media, we treated like a funny person. Like in the first time, she was a little cute girl. She's saying we are all going to die. Okay, we have to know that. The second phase, it was like several months later when she started going in public spaces such as the UN Assembly or the European Parliament. And she became much more aggressive in the communication. I think that was a great choice because it mobilized a lot of people, a lot of youngsters that say, okay, that's the fight I want to fight for. And do you remember the speech was like, the dare you, how dare you? So, okay, this was very,
very powerful.
Like Greta was, if I don't remember bad, was like 1 week ago to a very famous TV show in America. It was called The View. It's like a very popular TV show. And they published that section of the video. So that had an impact. But that brought a problem, in my opinion, 2 problems. One very good thing and one very bad thing. The very good thing is that, as I said, the young generation said, we have a fight to fight for. And that is the biggest difference between the Z generation and my generation. I'm from 1991, millennial generation. Because my generation is a little bit apathic. And the Z generation said, we want to live in a planet that still exists, or where the humans still exist. So, but the other problem is that the reaction of the other generations, like the older ones, that said, okay, this Pippi Longstocking, I know the Swedish character of the girl with the ponytails, has made long stocking. We called in Italy Pippi Calzelunghe, and several media of the right in Italy started calling Greta Pippi Calzelunghe. Like, this girl is destroying our future because she says that we are all going to die. There are a bunch of lies. So there were the Fridays for Future movement, youngsters that go all over the streets of Europe, especially in Italy, but you also have the narration of the media, storytelling. And this rage second phase of Greta, where she says our house is burning down, had a deep impact on the older generation, says, okay, because they had to make a choice, in my opinion. Are we the villain of the story or not? And the third phase, this one, there is a huge gap between the second and the third phase. Because in this third phase, as I said, and I sum it up in the video, so I'm not adding nothing more, just one thing, is that a lot of people could lose themselves. How many famous people happen something and they don't know how to keep up, to change the narrative? But she did very well with this new movie about our relationship with nature. So last thing to say, this is the third phase, but for the sake of the climate, in my opinion, she will have to be a fourth, a fifth, and a sixth phase, because this battle is going to last many centuries, and my cat is very concerned about that. So that's why she made a statement, because you don't know, but with her little fingers, animal fingers, she typed, "I love Greta."
Good. I'm glad that we have a friend in your cat, and that she's willing to fight the same battles that we're going to fight. But I really like the way that you've broken it down into various phases. I'll admit that as the media attention dipped off slightly on the Fridays for Future movement, I hadn't really continued to pay attention. I guess that I am one of those people who is more fed the information rather than searching for it myself, which is a problem I will deal with, no doubt, in the future. But I really enjoyed your breakdown, essentially, of the different phases of Greta, especially starting off from this very, very iconic attention-grabbing role that she had. So to continue, and you touch upon a little bit on how the pandemic has actually logistically impacted Greta's movement, and generally the youth movement that it is. So I'm wondering if you see any benefits or any limitations, or both, to having to move from this kind of direct action of skipping school in person to online activism.
Of course, I don't see any benefits on the long term. We cannot do any kind of protest of any kind just online, because there's never been a revolution online. Even though if we don't need a revolution like fighting, but a cultural revolution that can spread also through social media. I think the only benefit during this month is that maybe the Fridays for Future movement, but not just them, started to act in other ways. I mean, like producing better videos, producing better narrative on social media, knowing and understanding that the media are important to go in the places where people usually don't go. For example, in Italy, 98% of people just inform through television. That's a bad news for my newspaper, because 90%, of course, 98 watches television, and maybe 60% watches, I don't know, watch social media and newspaper. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So those people will not see, or will never go on public places just to fight for the climate. They have to be informed. So that's why I think they knew how to use a new weapon. And second of all, the other benefit was that they tried the trial, sorry for the play words, they tried to go on court. They say, okay, we can go on the streets, but we have also to go on the places where people decide, and the places where the jurisdiction can say a government is not doing the right thing. But the bad thing in these months is that we talked about cases, deaths, masks, and of course, this world right now has to reinvent their economy in order to survive. So I'm a little bit skeptical about the effectiveness of convincing people just primarily concerned about climate change. So that's a big issue that online or offline Fridays for Future movement will have to deal.
That's very interesting, and I like that you brought this up because it leads directly into my next question, which is how do you think that climate change as a whole can then reinvent their communication after the pandemic, especially since priorities seem to have shifted, especially as you mentioned from an economic perspective. So, or what do you think about the different ways, perhaps, or any ideas that you have, or anything that you've seen that's beginning to happen on reinventing communication about climate change?
I hope Greta is taking notes now, Andrea.
I'm sure she's watching.
Of course, or we'll send her the video. As you all guys that are watching this video, you should go to this website of Sphera and watch all of our videos that are very cool. The Italians are better, but that's the typical only thing I will say right now. To answer your question, I would say this, that my opinion, but that's only my opinion, I don't think that the climate change will have the exposure that had in the previous the pandemic. I don't think we will catch that point of everyone talking just about that issue, but I think that it is right now in our debate. It's not the first thing, but we always talk about in every issue we deal with. So that's just a victory for me. The other thing is that we should change the name. Not talk about the climate change, but talking about another expression that usually Greta, if you look at her statements, she uses very much, climate crisis. And also, we published several articles on Linkiesta and Linkiesta about this issue. We should probably change the perspective of the climate change, like the planet is not suffering. We are suffering because of the planet, because the planet's lasted in 4.5 billion years, or I don't know, but a long time for sure. And the planets are going to exist, such as Mars or I don't know the name in English, so I will not say, but other planets, like there are other planets with no life within. So the problem is that we will not survive with a certain percent of degrees. If it's too hot, I mean, we will not survive even though if we put a bikini or a bath suit. So that is a problem. But if I say to you that if you behave well, the planet will survive for centuries, you will not behave well because you say, okay, it depends on the level of your seriousness, but I mean, always everyone looks at this particular. But if I say to you, if you don't behave well, if you don't treat the planet well, if you don't do your recycle circle, that is going to be a problem for your health because you're dying younger, because you get cancer, because you will never enjoy a normal summer, because every month is going to be a summer. So if we change that, in my opinion, and that's what Greta did in the second phase, I think this will make a point. Because in my opinion, we don't need 7 billion people to knock on the door of the powerful ones and say, change it. But we have to have, sorry for the play of words, that new generation of politicians have to write the laws that help us the planet. And I think this will always be, because the new generation knows that the climate change is important. But the last thing to say, we have to change, not talking just about the planet, but talking about your health, your future, not your health, Julie. I suppose that you are fine. But in the future, you and me are going to be in danger, and all the people that listen to us if we don't do something.
I see. So you would perhaps promote more of a human-centric approach to really make people understand the risks that they're facing on a personal level, which I think makes a little bit of sense. It's kind of like, I imagine telling really, really wealthy people who probably contribute quite a bit to climate change that they won't be able to go on their skiing holidays because there won't be any snow left. I feel like that might be a good way to get to them.
This is the point.
Yeah, attack
exactly
these
the
smaller pleasures. And also
Yeah.
health, of course, which is no small pleasure at all. But I think that's
But it's a pleasure to be alive, so yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's a pleasure to be in good health. It's a pleasure not to have too many microplastics in our bodies. That's one of the big things that I read about that I think creates a lot of stress in me is microplastics in the water and in food and everything. So I do understand that, and I think that it does seem to be a little bit where Greta's heading, especially at the end of the video with the quote saying, you know, if we don't do something, we're fucked. You know, it's us. It's not necessarily the planet itself. But now I would like to take a moment to discuss the situation specifically in Italy. So I was wondering if you could enlighten us, myself and of course our audience, a little bit about the kind of climate change discourse that happens in Italy, both in the media and a bit more generally on the ground, you know, the kinds of discussions that people are likely to have about it.
Of course, in Italy, there's something like what happens in the world. Like young guys, young girls always talk about climate, and the older ones talk less about climate. So I think that's a general trend. But what differs us from other countries, in my opinion, is the way climate change changes our communication in the public sphere. I'll be concrete, telling you that we have a huge problem of the grounds and the rivers and the floods and all the problems that a normal weather would normally not infect to other countries. What I mean is that if it rains in London, which always happens, or in Cornwall or in other countries, these will not bring to bridges that are collapsing, or highways that are collapsing, or houses, and so on. In Italy, this is a common theme in the last 5 years or 6 years, especially in regions like Liguria, which is the tiny region which is in the border with France, or we have also the problems related to earthquake, but that's not so concerned about the climate change. But what I mean, we saw the effects of the climate change in the normal life. So we are very sensible. We are very keen on fighting this kind of issue. But we have the problem of other countries, that what people want is not usually what governments do. And that's why, for example, if we are talking about the recovery plan, I don't know if you want to mention it now or later.
Please go for it.
We have this problem that only 16% of 2035 billions of the recovery plan will be settled on the climate areas. Let's name that. So that's a problem for us, because the government, the previous government Conte, of the name of the prime minister, promised very much to solve this issue that I talked to you about the flood, but not just that. So that's a problem. And that's why in Italy, the Fridays for Future movement, not actually the Fridays for Future movement, but some young guys, associations, 203 people just went on a court in order to say the government is not doing so much in order to solve this issue. And we have also this problem with hydrogen, with the renewables, because we don't know how to deal with the transition. I'm sure other countries, and if you look up at the video of Sphera, you will see, for example, Poland has a huge problem with the transition to coal, to the renewable. Italy started that journey before other countries, not like Germany, but not at all like other countries. We are like in the middle, but we don't know what kind of energy we want to pursue. Because, for example, France, and this is a very particular issue, because I'm not saying nuclear is bad or good, okay? Has its benefits, but if the central blows up like in Chernobyl, it's a little bit a problem. And we have a little bit. So, but if you talk with the experts, as we did at Linkiesta, all our vertical ends up with the guest. except for gastronomica. I want you to look up. It's about food, but it's in Italian. So what I was saying is that 10 years ago, we had several referendums about the water public, about the nuclear, and the Italians, with an overwhelming majority, said no, we want public water, and we don't want nuclear, central nuclears. And that's a problem, not because I'm for nuclears at all, but because for a country like us, which has no energy, we had to go very fast to other kind of energies. And right now we have oil, we have biogas, we have hydrogen, but we are like in the middle. So the government should do more. But I'm afraid that we need much more the public attention on it, because Italy usually talks about 3 issues, and I'll stop. Football, and today Italy plays with against Turkey. Good luck to us. The second thing is about politics, but in a Machiavellian way, like who is going to stab whom. And the third thing is about the cases of today, les cas du jour, as the French says. So climate is not on these 3 topics, and it should be, but please not. It doesn't have to replace football. This is my opinion.
Priority. Yeah, it's going to be hard to play football if it gets too hot, though. So I think everything's quite linked.
That's a philosophy. That's a mentality.
I think that's how you can get all the football fans to turn around.
Yeah.
So you've spoken a bit about the government, and I wonder if you have any particular insight on the kinds of measures, because at Sphera, for example, we've been talking a lot about this goal that the EU has to be climate neutral by 2050. So I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of insight on the kind of measures that Italy is putting into place to try and meet this goal and do their part, as it were.
One thing that you could say, because I said the government has not spent so much on green areas. The government could reply to me, to you, and to us, saying, okay, but we are promising to spend a lot of money on trains, on rebuilding all the train scheme in Italy, especially in the center south, where there are no trains at all. I mean, not so fast trains, because we want to go down the flights. We want to diminish the number of flights and increasing the number of trains. I think that was is a good example of what our country can do. I would mention other 2 things. The first thing is about the renewable sources. Government is trying to give money to the Italians in order to rebuild their homes. There is a particular measure that is called eco bonus. Just have to change the pronunciation of the name. We are a very pleasant country to the English language. It's the eco bonus. You can use the money in order to make your house producing less and less pollution. Or we have this huge problem of the transportation. So as I said, not only the trains, but also the public transportation. But we have here a huge problem, and then I'll stop. The problem is this, that we are promising we as the government, we are promising to replace with new public like buses or coach cars and so on. We are trying to replace with cars with oil fuel. So it's not going to be the best. It's like, okay, it's not a Euro 4, it's going to be a Euro 6. And when I say Euro 4, Euro 6, people doesn't know, I mean the kind of how your car produces pollution. The higher the better it is. And of course, it's better with new and maybe hybrid vehicles. That's going to be a problem because we have maybe to increase the bikes. But that's a good thing, because in another video of Sphera that has been published, there are a lot of, or will be, I don't know, we will discover, Italy and other countries increase the number of bike lanes. So several measures, but not enough.
Okay, not enough. I see. And so since we're talking about youth climate movements, I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about whether or not there's a strong generational difference in the way that people think about climate change in Italy. We've talked a little bit about, young people, putting the act in activism, and then perhaps older people being a little bit more reticent to dive right into that. But I'm wondering if there's any particularly pronounced generational divide on this topic in Italy.
If I look at the data, I would say yes, because from the recent polls, there are 70% of young people who say the first concern is climate change. And I have no doubt it's true, because it's public data made by our statistical institute. But my feeling is that what do you think at 18 years old is not what you think at 30 years old. And that's what Greta and the Fridays for Future movement and the media will have to do, not just inform, but just in this way, in this case, form a new generation. Like we need to see a consolidation of thoughts. Because if I'm 18 years old and I go to school and I don't have to pay bills and I don't have responsibility of any kind beside choosing my next vacation, probably Greece. No, Lampedusa, will go in Sicily. This is my concern. But when I'm 30, I have other concerns. So for example, if I live in a rural area in Italy, such as Valle d'Aosta, which is a little region northwest, or Sicily, or Basilicata, or Calabria, and I have only a car who gave my father, and it's only by gas, I will not have the money to buy an electric car. And maybe I will say, I don't like this transition, because I always see in my particular side. So to answer your question, of course, younger generation are very keen on resolving this issue, but my problem is the way they will mix it up with older generation. And we have also this little tendency, I don't know if it's similar to other countries, but it's like a medieval, feudal, something like a way of thinking, that my parents and grandparents, the way they think influences me a lot on how I think. And it's something horrible to all the listeners who are from the cities, but very cool, very cool, of course, because I'm saying, but very real and true for the people of what we call in Italy aree interne, internal areas, because life is different. Trump taught us the people from Minnesota are not the people from New York City. There's not better or worse. It's different demands, different issues, and different way to solve it. So I think the Greta's and Fridays for Future movements storytelling, but I'm saying storytelling in the best way possible. I mean, letting people know what the climate crisis is. It's the toughest challenge, but that's, in my opinion, those are the ones that they have to convince more.
Mm-hmm. So this actually, it's like you're in my brain, because this leads perfectly into my next question, which was going to be a little bit about whether or not we should, or whether or not it's good that we do center climate activism on youth. Because on one hand, I've always understood it, and I really see it this way as a relatively young person myself, is that the ones who have to live through the worsening consequences over time, because it's very much a ticking time bomb kind of situation that we have with the climate crisis, as you say we should call it. What do you think then about centering climate activism on youth?
I think it's the right was and it is the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do when Greta started, because of that younger generation going in the streets. Right now we are talking about climate change, and I think it has to survive during the years. Younger and younger generations should be so committed, like the Z generation it is. But in my opinion, so the battle of the time, for me, it's won. Because the new politicians of the future, even though they are the Trump of the future, such as they deny climate change or climate crisis, but they have to face this issue. Like, for example, the politicians of now, they are 50 or 60 years old. They've been shaped by the civil rights movement of the 60s, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, but also Martin Luther King and so on. They, even though they are pro or against, they talk about this issue because it shaped their generation. But my concern is that 60 years ago, people in America and in Europe, more in America than in Europe, were fighting for letting people of black color Asian or minorities to take the bus and have no problem and be respected in the place of work. And right now, these years, we are protesting not for this because we made a little effort, but we are protesting for a guy who is killed by the police because he's black, or not because he's black, but because of his blackness, he wasn't treated the way probably a white male would have been treated. And I'm so happy on the way I speak English. But what I'm saying is that there's always time to go back. That is the problem. And just focusing on the youngster, on the young people, will be cool for the future generation, but we have to fight right now. We have right now the politician. And I know that, for example, the European Commission, European Parliament, several leaders in the European Union, and several leaders all around the world are committed to the climate issues. But they have a little problem, in my opinion, that they a level of being tough is not so strong as, in my opinion, will be with the leaders of the future. Because for us, if you talk about my generation, if you tell me that there is in front of me, I'm heterosexual, I have a wonderful fiancée that I hope she will see this video. But if you tell me, okay, there's an homosexual person, it's like if you tell me, okay, there's a person with the black hair. I don't care. I don't give a fuck, because for me, it's not a problem at all. And I want to him or to her or to other people have as many rights as possible. Because for me, it's something normal. Because I've been raised in a, even though if I live in Italy, which has a lot of problems about that, but my family, my education, I know that these are civil and human life rights. But the problem is that I don't have the same with the climate change, the climate crisis. Because for several years during my education, the only climate changey things that they told me, it was to reuse the top of the bottle. Do you know if you did the same at school when you have to put it in a basket and maybe someone with a disabled will have a wheelchair? And I was proud to do it every day, but it was the only thing I did. And we have to do more, take more the train, or not buying monoplastic stuff or other things like that. So to sum up in one sentence, I think it's very good that the younger people are fighting this battle, but please not left the other behind, because they are the guy who are going to be against you if you don't involve them.
I see, and I think it's interesting that in your what you just said is kind of going a little bit back and forth between older people, younger people, and the kind of education that certain people might be lacking because it wasn't a prominent discussion or a prominent thing. And I think for me, what it indicates is that there's very much a meshing of both, and that we do need general action, general consensus, and a general sense of solidarity across generations in order to make everyone feel the same way, or at least not necessarily the same way, because I think that's too much to ask for, but at least feel the same general sense of urgency or necessity that this issue presents in the ways that we have to change the way that we live, and also demand legislative change, because I've seen a lot of talk about individual choices and individual responsibility, but it's not so much just about that, because individuals hold a certain power, but then there's a whole, network infrastructure of decisions and governments and big business, as people love to talk about, which I think is a whole conversation in itself. But I do agree with what you're saying, that in terms of including people in the debate of different generations, it's quite important to create this general, God, can I even use the word vibe for this? But a general.
Or maybe we can use the word environment.
Yeah,
like environment, like in a climate, but also normal way.
Yeah, absolutely. Just creating an environment of wanting to deal with the climate crisis and creating more solidarity, as opposed to differences in how we want to live our individual lives in the face of this crisis. So we're running a little bit out of time, but I have one final question for you, Andrea, and it's very much centered around your video. But Finally, in the end, after this discussion, after all the research you made for this video, do you think that we will talk about climate change again the way we did a year and a half ago?
I hope we'll do so. I think we have to do extra effort in order to do that. But I think the only person or the only movement which can do that is the Fridays for Future movement, and it's Greta Thunberg, because she, several years ago, understood what is the magical recipe for the capitalism. Using the same rules, using the same words, using the same taste for pop culture, but driving the attention to another way. So it will need more effort, but I think that, as I said in the video, as you can see and listen in the last seconds of the video, the way she pronounced that insults, in my opinion, is important, because this will make us so careful, and it took us our attention. So to answer your question, I hope so, but we have to do a lot of efforts. We as journalists, and her and the movement as activists.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for this great discussion, Andrea. I very much enjoyed it. And thank you for joining me on a Friday night, which I know is not always the easiest thing to do. But in a pandemic, it turns out that we have a lot more free time.
Yeah. Thank you, pandemic. No. Thank you very much, and thank you for the listeners. And please, please, please watch the Sphera's videos, because we are cool, as you can see with Julie every live debate she does, as I hope you saw with me. Please watch it, put a like, and put a like also on Linkiesta, because we deserve it.
All right, fantastic. So I wish you a very good weekend, and see you soon.
Bye. See you soon.